Fede, come back. Welcome back to yet another exciting episode of the Mzansi YouTube channel. My name is Zondo and I'd like to welcome you on this very exciting platform that we've created where you and I get to engage on the day-to-day politics and issues that affect us and maybe even more on a greater scale in terms of our country at large. I'd first like to thank everyone so far that I think has shown the interest by liking our page, subscribing, as well as recommending us. I think I've seen as well in our different social media platforms how you guys are finally picking up and seeing actually what this is all about. And I'd like to invite you and also invite another person as well to say, hey, have you heard that our Mzansi has officially launched a YouTube channel where we focus on the current issues that affect you and I, on these issues that are pressing, and times issues maybe that we don't barely get to comment on because usually if it's on the news, it's on the headlines. But now we are bringing it live, direct to your smart device where you and I can engage on these very interesting issues. With that being said, today we're looking at a topic that I think has been in many of us thoughts, and perhaps we've seen as well what's currently taking place, looking at the fact that the matrics are currently writing their final exams. Hence, we would like to look at the current state of our education system. 3 areas, and maybe a bit more, that we want to focus on. First is looking at the current pass rate that has been set for I don't know how long it's been at that stage. And secondly, to look at then the impact this is having overall when we look at the learner's inability to read and understand. And obviously, this will have an impact in terms of our unemployment, as well as maybe the remedies currently that have been proposed to try and alleviate this very challenge. Let's try and see what you and I can discuss on this very topic. In the words of Kwame Nkrumah, where he said, "We shall measure the progress of our nation by the number of children in school, but most importantly, by the quality of that education." I'm paraphrasing. And to be quite honest, when I look at the current state of our education, it's actually more about the number of children that we have at school at the moment, as opposed to the quality that we produce. Which is why perhaps when we look at the current state of our education, so to be quite frank, 30% pass mark, perhaps at the time in which it was initiated, given the conditions and the fact that resources as well as access to education, we do know that there are certain communities and certain maybe provinces as well that are more disadvantageous than others. Hence, however, the question though brought forth, especially by BOSA, and Musi Maimane really spearheading this to say we need to start challenging that, to then say, if in this day and age we are still happy with the current pass mark that we've set, then what is the future that we're also setting up for our children as well as a nation going forward? In fact, there's one as well, I think I saw somewhere, I think I was reading an article, and he's mentioned that if we fail to invest in our education, we are ultimately saying that we're also not investing in our future. And when I listen, for example, to the current minister as well saying, look, at the moment, there aren't any plans in as far as maybe changing the current percentage that's been set. And issues perhaps also raised in and around how COVID-19, the pandemic itself, may have delayed certain things. And we all saw how children had to figure out how to study from home, figure out how to write their exams, and many as well that had to be pushed simply because they weren't able to actually sit down and write their exams. However, the issues we're talking about here precede COVID-19. These are issues that have been there long before that. And the question then that I want to pose at you is to say, does this mean in general that we do not prioritize our education? Does this mean that every other thing maybe that we're setting out to do wouldn't necessarily start by saying, well, let's start with the education? When we look at, for example, recently we saw that in the Eastern Cape, there's a couple of schools, for example, that mentioned, hey, it's not good conditions for children to actually sit and write their final exams. And this is by far just the many other issues that have been raised in as far as our current education system is set up for. And so my question becomes, what then is the future that we are looking at, the future that we keep speaking about, and the young people that we keep saying we want to prioritize and make them successful. When we look at as well, perhaps let's move away from the 30% pass mark, right? The other issue at hand is that the learner comprehension and perhaps their ability to read and understand has by far been very concerning. So let's look at then the current stats and the research that was currently done, right? That actually says that 8 out of 10 grade 4s cannot read to understand. That means you can give that specific pupil a sentence to read, but they wouldn't understand what they wrote. That even if we were to show them what they read, they wouldn't connect the two. And all of this, I guess, I wonder to say, is this indeed then the quality of education that we have and that we would like to produce as a country?